Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to explore a pivotal moment in British theatre history. We'll be discussing Look Back in Anger by John Osborne, which first premiered at the Royal Court Theatre in London on May 8, 1956. This play is widely recognized as the launchpad for the angry young man movement and the British kitchen sink drama. In this presentation, we'll cover an act-by-act summary, analyze its themes, delve into the characters, and examine the imagery that makes this play so powerful. So, let's get started and discover why this play remains such an influential piece in theatrical history. Let's start by examining this powerful quote from Jimmy Porter, a central character in the play. He says, "I suppose people of our generation aren't able to die for good causes any longer. There aren't any good, brave causes left." This line really captures the sense of disillusionment and frustration that many young people felt during the time. It sets the tone for the entire piece, highlighting themes of discontent and societal critique. Moving on, the play is structured into 3 acts with 6 scenes, all set within a single bedsit flat. The setting is a typical Midlands town during Easter weekend in 1956, which helps ground the story in a specific social and historical context. The genre of the play is quite significant. It's a kitchen sink drama, also known as social realism, which focuses on the gritty, everyday lives of ordinary people. It's part of the angry young man theater movement, emphasizing working-class struggles and social issues. The play also functions as a problem play, tackling themes like class and identity, encouraging the audience to reflect on societal divisions. The play debuted on May 8, 1956, at the Royal Court Theatre in London, a venue known for groundbreaking new works. It was directed by Tony Richardson, a notable figure in theatre and film. The playwright, John Osborne, was not only a prolific writer, but also an actor and a co-founder of Woodfall Film Productions, making him a key influencer in British cultural history. Overall, this slide introduces us to the core themes and context of the play, showing how it embodies a critique of social class, identity, and the disillusionment of the post-war generation, all delivered through a powerful, realist theatrical style. Now, let's look at how this movement vividly captured working-class domestic life with unflinching realism. Imagine the cramped bedsit, the ironing board, the Sunday newspaper, and even the jazz trumpet, all details that bring this world to life. Unlike previous theater that often idealized or sentimentalized the working class, kitchen sink drama confronted its real texture, showing the raw, authentic experiences of ordinary people. Moving on, kitchen sink drama was part of a broader literary movement involving writers like Osborne, Kingsley Amis with his novel Lucky Jim, John Brayne's Room at the Top, and Alan Sillitoe's Saturday Night and Sunday Morning. These writers expressed the frustration of talented men who felt blocked by their class. And the anger they conveyed was genuine. It wasn't just for show, but a real reflection of their feelings about social limitations. This movement also fueled what we call the angry young men. These writers and playwrights aimed to revolutionize British theatre, especially through the efforts of the Royal Court Theatre, founded in 1956. Their goal was to bring working-class voices onto the stage, breaking away from the dominance of the more genteel, upper-class settings of Noel Coward or Agatha Christie. Their defining work, Look Back in Anger, marked this revolutionary shift. Now, this theatrical revolution was closely tied to the wider cultural context. The Queen's coronation in 1953 was celebrated as a symbol of national greatness, but Osborne's play, for example, cynically deflates that idea. The character Jimmy Porter embodies the rage of a generation sold a bright future that never quite materialized. The middle-class accents on the BBC, the complacency of the church, and the social gates of universities, these all become targets of this new, angry voice. During this period, Britain was stepping into what we call the New Elizabethan Age. But behind this veneer of greatness, there was a lot of disillusionment. The establishment, that is, the powerful ruling class, was seen as the enemy. The Suez Crisis in 1956, the same year as the premiere of Look Back in Anger, exposed the hollowness of Britain's imperial pretensions. The country was still dressed in the costume of empire, yet its actual power was waning. And speaking of Britain in 1956, it's important to note that rationing had only just ended in 1954. The welfare state was still very new, and the class system remained largely intact. Young men, many of whom had been educated beyond their class origins thanks to the Butler Act of 1944, found themselves caught between worlds. Too educated for traditional working-class life, but often unwelcome in the upper class. This sense of being stranded was a key part of the cultural landscape. Finally, all of this took place against the backdrop of post-war austerity. Britain was still recovering from the war's devastation, and the social fabric was changing, but not yet fully transformed. This context deeply influenced the themes and characters of the theater and literature of the time, shaping a generation's sense of identity and frustration. On this slide, we see Hugh, Jimmy's old friend, and his mother, who took Jimmy in after his father died. They represent a version of working-class solidarity that, unfortunately, the present action can't recover. Although they are never seen on stage, they are constantly referenced, symbolizing a connection to a shared past and a sense of community that has been lost. We also have offstage presences like Hugh Tanner and Mrs. Tanner. Hugh is mentioned but never appears, representing that enduring but distant support network. Mrs. Tanner, Jimmy's surrogate mother, embodies that same working-class loyalty and warmth, which contrasts sharply with the more superficial social interactions Jimmy engages in. Then there's Allison's retired Army Colonel father, Colonel Redfern. He's depicted as a decent but bewildered man from another era, someone who genuinely struggles to understand the rapidly changing world around him. His appearance in Act II is particularly poignant, as it's one of the play's most sympathetic moments, showing a man genuinely at a loss. Despite his confusion, Jimmy respects him, highlighting a complex relationship rooted in shared history and unspoken understanding. Next, we have Allison's friend and rival, Helena Charles. She's Welsh, warm, and physically affectionate with both Jimmy and Allison. Helena acts as a mediating force within the play, embodying a level of compassion and understanding that contrasts with Jimmy's hostility. She loves both characters, but recognizes she can't save either of them. Her departure in Act III signifies the end of the domestic world Jimmy has tried to build, emphasizing the play's theme of inevitable change and loss. Moving to Jim's friend and lodger, Cliff Lewis, she's the upper-middle-class daughter of a colonel, kind, passive, and enduring. Throughout the play, her silent ironing acts as her response to Jimmy's tirades, symbolizing her quiet resilience. Her miscarriage marks a turning point emotionally in the story, illustrating the personal costs of the chaos around her. Importantly, she's neither victim nor villain, but a reflection of the collateral damage in this turbulent world. Finally, we have Allison's wife, Allison Porter. She's 26, a graduate of a white-tile university, running a sweet stall despite her education. She's brilliant, passionate, self-pitying, cruel, and articulate, all wrapped into Jimmy's fiery world. His rage is a defining feature of the play, but Osborne also suggests that this rage stems from evasion, an attempt to mask deeper vulnerabilities. Jimmy embodies the archetype of the angry young man, rebellious, frustrated, seeking meaning amid chaos. And at the center, of course, is Jimmy Porter himself, our protagonist, our antihero. He's complex, flawed, and deeply human, embodying the tensions and struggles of his generation. This slide underscores how these characters and their relationships reflect the broader themes of class, change, and personal turmoil that run throughout the play. On this slide, we see a series of powerful emotional scenes that really drive home the complexity of the characters' lives. First, Cliff announces he's leaving, which is a moment of shock for Jimmy. It's a genuine loss that shakes him to his core. Then, we have Allison returning, but she's broken by a miscarriage, showing how deeply personal tragedies affect her. Helena's departure signifies her inability to sustain what she has done. She's overwhelmed and chooses to leave. Jimmy and Allison then retreat into their own private world, using their language of bears and squirrels, highlighting how they find solace in their shared, intimate understanding amidst chaos. This scene offers a glimpse of a qualified resolution, a tentative step toward healing or acceptance. Moving forward, the scenes continue to deepen the narrative. Colonel Redfern arrives to take Allison away, with Helena present, and Jimmy's father is dying, adding layers of familial obligation and loss. Allison leaves with her father, marking another departure. Weeks later, Helena has become Jimmy's mistress, living the life Allison once had. The ironings and repetitions of their routines underscore how patterns repeat across different relationships and circumstances, emphasizing the cyclical nature of their struggles. This slide encapsulates how personal crises, relationships, and repeated patterns shape the characters' journeys, aligning with the overall theme of human resilience and the cyclical nature of life's hardships. On this slide, we see a powerful juxtaposition between the Sunday papers, which symbolize everything Jimmy hates: banality, complacency, and middle-class smugness, and a key symbol, the ironing board, representing Allison's silent endurance. While Jimmy's fury often erupts in tirades, Allison endures quietly, embodying a kind of restrained strength. The central image here is suffocating and volatile rage, barely contained beneath the surface. It captures the tense atmosphere of their attic flat in the Midlands on Easter Sunday 1956. This scene is set during Act I, where nothing seems to change, but there's an ever-present potential for explosion. Notice how Jimmy retreats into his jazz trumpet upstairs, his own language of expression when words fail or become too painful. Meanwhile, the overall tone is one of underlying tension, an attic flat full of unspoken frustrations and simmering anger. This moment is crucial because it encapsulates the emotional landscape of the play. A confined space where deep-seated resentments threaten to burst at any moment, reflecting the broader themes of repression, conflict, and the fragile veneer of civility. Cliff's physical warmth, wrestling with Jimmy, comforting Allison, is the act I counterbalance to verbal violence. Osborne uses Cliff to show that there is affection in this household, but it moves through the body rather than language. Jimmy's physical tenderness to Allison after the iron burn is the most genuine emotional moment of the act. Now let's focus on Cliff's role as the mediating body. His physical actions, wrestling, comforting, serve as a way to mediate the tension in the household, emphasizing that sometimes physical connection can communicate what words cannot. Moving on to Allison's ironing, this is one of modern drama's most powerful stage images. She irons through Jimmy's tirades, responding with silence and domestic activity to his verbal aggression. The act of ironing is both mundane and deeply symbolic. She's pressing out wrinkles, maintaining the domestic fabric, and absorbing his violence into practical labor. It's a visual metaphor for how she copes with chaos. The ironing board itself becomes a kind of domestic theater, a stage where everyday life plays out. It's a symbol of routine, but also of resilience and quiet strength amid turmoil. Now let's consider Jimmy's long tirades. They're not just random speeches, they reveal his character. His intelligence, wit, cruelty, and self-pity are all expressed through his speech patterns. Osborne crafts a character who's defined by verbal energy, which simultaneously reveals and conceals his true situation. It's a complex way of showing how language can be both revealing and masking at the same time. Then there's Jimmy's monologue. His rhetoric serves as a key part of his character. It's a form of self-expression, but also a way to manipulate and impress. His words tell us a lot about how he sees himself and his world. Finally, the setting. The attic bedsit with the ironing board, gas stove, and single wardrobe is a deliberate choice. In 1956, this environment was rarely shown on stage, making it a political statement. It's a real, unromanticized depiction of post-war Britain, where educated, talented people live in poverty. The setting isn't just a backdrop. It's a documentary-style observation that underscores the social realities the characters face. Allison leaves, marking a significant break in the domestic pattern we've seen so far. This moment signals a key shift in the narrative, as the stability of their home is fundamentally disrupted. It's important to note that at this point, Allison's pregnancy remains unrevealed to Jimmy, which adds a layer of hidden vulnerability to her character. She keeps a secret, a crucial one, That will influence how her story unfolds and deepen her complexity as a figure. From Jimmy's perspective, Allison's departure introduces a sense of loss and uncertainty. Meanwhile, Allison herself can be seen as a sympathetic figure, a person from a dying world, someone who's endured so much and yet remains quietly resilient. Jimmy, in turn, half respects her, recognizing her strength even as he struggles with his feelings. Now the Colonel appears as a key figure, quiet, bewildered, and almost anachronistically decent, truly a man from another era. His arrival underscores the theme of moral contrast and highlights the shifting social and personal boundaries within the play. Jimmy's desire for Allison's suffering, which reaches its moral nadir here, reveals a darker aspect of his character. It's a pivotal moment that underscores the play's exploration of morality and human vulnerability. The central speech in Act II, Scene 1, captures all these tensions: Jimmy's complex emotions, Allison's secret, and the moral landscape they navigate. This scene, set on that Easter Sunday evening, is where Allison secretly confides in Helena about her pregnancy, an act of quiet rebellion and hope, as she has not yet shared this news with Jimmy. Throughout this scene, we see a series of key events: Allison's departure with her father, Helena's decision to stay, and the emotional emptiness left behind. These moments serve as a turning point, emphasizing how much has changed and how some shifts in their lives are irreversible. Let's start with the scene depicted here, the kiss before going upstairs, symbolizing desire and betrayal. It's a powerful moment that captures the complex emotions at play. The key image shows the bedsit remaining unchanged, yet only the occupants shift, highlighting how the environment stays the same even as relationships transform. This leads us to the pattern. We see Jimmy's character evolve from being Helena's harshest critic to her lover. This shift introduces a layer of moral ambiguity, making us question notions of right and wrong within this triangle. Looking at Helena's arc, we notice she's ironing. Her domestic role appears unchanged on the surface, but the woman within it has changed completely. Her actions reflect a complex mix of duty, desire, and moral conflict. Now, the central irony of Act II, Scene 2, is quite striking. Helena, who once despised Jimmy and took Allison away from him, is now occupying Allison's position herself. It's a complete reversal that underscores the theme of moral ambiguity and role reversal. The scene ends with Helena passionately kissing Jimmy and then going upstairs with him, a moment that's both shocking and revealing of her internal conflict. It's a pivotal point that blurs moral boundaries. Earlier, a letter arrives from Colonel Redfern informing Helena that Allison has had a miscarriage and been ill. Helena reads it, but Jimmy learns about Allison's condition indirectly, emphasizing the distance and disconnect between characters. Helena's responses to Jimmy's tirades become more confrontational. She fights back, engages, and challenges him. Yet, she remains drawn to him, illustrating her complex emotional state, caught between resistance and attraction. Jimmy's return home continues the pattern of monologues, but now Helena is the audience rather than Allison. Their interactions deepen the emotional and moral complexity of their relationship. Cliff and Helena's interaction is awkward. They're uncomfortable, loyal to their past roles within the household, which adds to the underlying tension. Crucially, Helena is still ironing, showing that the domestic role hasn't truly changed, only the woman occupying it. The ironing board remains, symbolizing how roles can be transferred but not fundamentally altered. Finally, some weeks later, we see Helena living with Jimmy in the same flat. She has become his mistress in Allison's absence, marking a significant shift in her role and highlighting the recurring pattern of desire, betrayal, and moral ambiguity that runs throughout the scene. In this scene, Osborne deliberately replicates the domestic setup from Act I. It's the same flat, the same ironing board, but with a different woman. This repetition serves to illustrate that Jimmy's problem isn't specific to Allison. It's not about her or any particular partner. Rather, it's something inside Jimmy himself. He would recreate this same dynamic with anyone. This emphasizes the play's core message that the root of his issues lies within him, not in his marriage. Moving on, let's talk about the repeating pattern. Helena's transformation is particularly striking. She shifts from being Jimmy's enemy to his mistress, and then she ends up on the ironing board. Osborne uses this as a pointed structural joke, highlighting a kind of moral irony. The character who is most moralistic, Helena, ends up in the most morally compromised position. This challenges the audience's expectations and underscores Osborne's refusal to let any character hold a position of ethical superiority. Now about Helena's reversal, this is a great example of structural irony. Originally, she might seem like a victim or an outsider, but her final position is quite different. It's almost humorous, but it's deeply ironic. Osborne is showing us that moral judgments aren't so clear-cut. Next, we come to Colonel Redfern. Interestingly, Osborne draws him with unexpected sympathy. Unlike the others, the Colonel is genuinely bewildered. He doesn't understand what has happened to the world he fought for. His confusion isn't meant to evoke comedy, but rather a sense of elegy, a lament for a lost world. By doing this, Osborne reminds us that the class Jimmy resents contains real human beings, not just symbolic targets. They're complex, and they evoke real empathy. Finally, Jimmy's speech about wishing Allison would lose a child is perhaps the most disturbing and revealing moment in the play. It shows how deeply his anger has corrupted his capacity for genuine emotion. But at the same time, Osborne roots this cruelty in Jimmy's own suffering, his father's death, his sense of betrayal by society. Jimmy struggles to connect with someone who hasn't suffered as he has, and his twisted wish for suffering becomes a distorted demand for empathy. It's a powerful reminder of how personal pain can distort moral boundaries. As we move to slide 11, we focus on a pivotal moment in the play, Cliff's departure, which marks a genuine loss for Jimmy and for the story as a whole. This scene takes place after Cliff leaves the flat, and what follows is Jimmy playing his trumpet alone. This music is incredibly honest. It's the one moment where words can't fully express what he's feeling, so his trumpet becomes his voice. Throughout this scene, Helena is present, watching Jimmy absorb this loss. We see her start to realize the limits of her involvement and her role in this relationship. She begins to understand that her actions and the environment she's created can only go so far in mediating or fixing things. Cliff's goodbye to Jimmy is warm but also final. It signals the end of a true, genuine connection, the kind of bond that's rare and meaningful in the play. Cliff admits he can't keep mediating between Jimmy and his other relationships anymore. This triangle has worn him out. What unfolds in this scene is a jazz trumpet duet intertwined with moments of comedy. Interestingly, the comedy here feels somewhat valedictory. It hints at an ending, a closing chapter. Jimmy's reaction to Cliff's departure is complex. There's bluster, anger, but underneath it all, genuine shock and grief. Cliff really was Jimmy's last emotional anchor, someone who understood him deeply. Cliff's announcement that he's leaving, moving to London, sets the scene's emotional tone. It's a clear sign that he's moving on with his life, leaving behind their shared world. And finally, we see the same flat, some months later. Jimmy and Cliff are doing their usual Sunday routine, but the atmosphere has shifted dramatically. Something feels terminal, like the foundation of their relationship has been irrevocably changed. This scene encapsulates a moment of profound loss and transition, reminding us of how fragile connections can be and how difficult it is to hold onto what once felt so vital. Now, in this key moment, we see Allison returning in Act III, Scene 2, symbolized by the bears and squirrels. This scene represents a complex emotional state. Are they finding resolution, or are they retreating into regression? The play leaves this open-ended, refusing to give us a clear answer. It suggests that perhaps both are happening at once, a mix of trying to heal and a desire to escape pain. Jimmy and Allison once again retreat into their private fantasy of bears and squirrels. These are the characters they play when words become impossible, when direct communication fails. This is their way of coping, of preserving some sense of safety amid chaos. This scene is the emotional climax of the play. but Osborne intentionally avoids catharsis. There's no straightforward reconciliation or resolution here. Instead, we see a moment of ambiguous comfort, both regression and potential healing, highlighting the complex, often unresolved nature of human relationships. So, in essence, this ending invites us to reflect on the fragile balance between moving forward and retreating into familiar, protective illusions. It's a powerful reminder that life's emotional journeys are rarely neat or conclusive. Now, let's explore the complex ending of the play, focusing on Jimmy and Allison in their private fantasy world. Critics often debate whether this scene signifies healing, where they've found a new language for vulnerability, or regression, where they retreat from reality into infantilism. Osborne intentionally leaves this ambiguous, emphasizing that there's no clear resolution, only a temporary refuge from confronting uncomfortable truths. It's a deliberate choice to show that neither character can fully face reality at this point. Next, we have the bears and squirrels scene, which captures this ambiguity perfectly. One of the most honest speeches in the play is when Helena says, "I can't take part in all this suffering." This moment is significant because Helena recognizes her own role and chooses to end her participation, achieving a kind of self-awareness and acting on it. Unlike Jimmy, who continues to perform, Helena's decision is unglamorous but authentic, and Osborne treats this with real respect. It highlights a key contrast between characters: Helena's honest self-knowledge versus Jimmy's ongoing performance. Moving on to Helena's principled exit, it's a pivotal moment. Her decision to leave is grounded in moral clarity, and it underscores a theme of integrity. It's a quiet but powerful assertion of self-awareness that contrasts sharply with the chaos around her. Now, let's consider Allison's miscarriage, which fulfills Jimmy's earlier curse in Act II, word for word. But Osborne doesn't present this as redemptive. Rather, it's a tragic fulfillment. The terrible wish coming true doesn't vindicate Jimmy. Instead, it deepens his guilt and complicates his character. The reunion afterward isn't triumphant or healing. It's devastated, illustrating that both characters have been broken enough that they can only be together in this damaged, fragile state. Turning to Cliff's departure, this moment evokes a rare, genuine emotion from Jimmy: true grief. Unlike his usual performative indifference, this is real. Cliff has been the only character who loved Jimmy without any hidden agenda, and his leaving removes that uncomplicated human connection from Jimmy's life. It's a moment of vulnerability that reveals a lot about Jimmy's emotional landscape. Finally, as we conclude ACTIII, we see how these moments, ambiguous endings, honest self-awareness, tragic fulfillment, tie into the overall theme. The play challenges us to consider whether true healing is possible, or if we're all just seeking temporary shelter from our realities. Osborne masterfully explores these questions without providing easy answers, leaving us to reflect on the complexity of human vulnerability and the nature of resolution. Osborne shows us that Jimmy's rage is actually partly self-defeating. He despises the establishment, but at the same time, he's obsessed with it. He rejects middle-class values, yet he's educated into middle-class forms of expression. So he can't fully escape what he hates, which creates this internal conflict. Now, when we look at the irony of Jimmy's position, Colonel Redfern and Allison's mother symbolize the ruling class from both sides. The father is portrayed as genuinely decent and sympathetic, while the mother, who's never seen but often attacked, embodies class snobbery at its most weaponized. Jimmy's marriage to Allison is really a complex act, both an act of love and a subtle form of class war. Moving on to Allison's family, this group acts as a symbol of the class system itself. The church, the Sunday newspapers, the BBC, the Conservative Party, all these institutions represent the establishment. Jimmy's criticisms aren't random. They're a systematic critique of these institutions that uphold class privilege while pretending to offer meritocracy. Now, considering Jimmy's background, he went to a white-tile university, what we'd call a red brick university, not Oxbridge. He's educated, but he's not fully accepted by the class that his education should have opened doors to. At the same time, he's no longer from a working-class background. He's caught in between classes, a classic example of the kind of predicament faced by the 1950s scholarship boy. This leads us to the core of the class trap. Jimmy's rage reflects the frustration of a generation that's been educated beyond their class origins, yet still denied the social mobility they were promised. It's this sense of being caught in between that fuels much of the social and personal tension we see in the play. All of this ties back to our main theme: class, the establishment, and social rage. It's about how these structures shape individual identities and create internal conflicts that resonate through society. There aren't any good, brave causes left. Jimmy's famous speech reveals something crucial about his own condition. He has the capacity for passionate commitment, but he lacks something meaningful to commit to. His anger isn't directed at a specific, achievable target. Instead, it's a general feeling of disillusionment that characterizes the age. This makes his anger both more intense and more ultimately futile. Now, an important point to understand is that Jimmy's anger often serves as a way of avoiding his own personal issues. If he's always attacking others, he doesn't have to confront himself. His tirades against the establishment prevent him from engaging with the real people right in front of him. Essentially, his anger acts as a shield, protecting him from intimacy and self-examination. Jimmy's rages are also a display of his intelligence. He's the most verbally gifted character on stage. His attacks are sharp, witty, culturally aware. Osborne shows us that anger can be a form of intellectual energy, but it can be misdirected. Jimmy's feelings are genuine, but his goal is destructive, catastrophically so. Let's also consider the sources of Jimmy's anger. It stems from deep, personal pain: his father's death, watching someone who believed in causes die without seeing them fulfilled. It's also rooted in his exclusion from genuine opportunities, and his sense that post-war Britain has betrayed his generation with false promises. His love for Allison, combined with his inability to truly connect with her emotionally, adds to this anger. So, his rage is a mix of accumulated grief, legitimate, but also self-inflicted and self-perpetuating. Finally, Osborne doesn't just validate Jimmy's anger. He explores its roots, its damaging effects, and how it traps Jimmy as much as it targets others. This theme helps us understand that anger, especially when rooted in unresolved pain, can be a destructive force that impairs both the individual and those around him. Cliff's uncomplicated physical affection for both Jimmy and Allison serves as a powerful model of a kind of loving that the couple themselves cannot achieve with each other. He acts as both mediator and embodied alternative, offering warmth without rhetoric, care without ownership. When Cliff departs, he leaves a void that neither Jimmy nor Allison can truly fill, highlighting how crucial his presence was to their emotional landscape. Moving on to Jimmy's love expressed through music, his jazz trumpet becomes where his genuine feelings go when words have become weaponized. After Cliff leaves, Jimmy plays alone, and through his trumpet, he communicates in a way that's inarticulate, non-verbal, but deeply expressive. Osborne positions this musical expression as the emotional truth-teller of the play, revealing what words cannot. Now consider the game of bears and squirrels. It's both touching and a bit alarming, this private language of protection, where the bear protects the squirrel, and the squirrel is vulnerable and in need of care. It's the only mode of relating where Jimmy can be truly tender, but it's also a fantasy, a constructed world of safety and innocence that doesn't quite match reality. This private language points to a deeper issue: Jimmy's pattern of recreating the same dynamic with Allison. Helena's occupation of Allison's place reveals that Jimmy's problem isn't with Allison specifically, but with his relationship to his own rage. The structural insight here is that he doesn't need a different woman. He needs a different relationship to his anger. Unfortunately, the play doesn't offer him that self-awareness. Jimmy's core complaint about Allison isn't her class, but her emotional non-engagement. He longs for a partner who will feel with him, rage with him, suffer with him. To him, her calmness feels like abandonment, and his cruelty is partly a desperate attempt to elicit any kind of response, any sign that she cares. It's a demand for emotional presence, a plea for connection. Allison, on her part, absorbs Jimmy's violence with a kind of ironing board steadiness. Critics have called her frustratingly passive, but feminist critics see her as representing women socialized into absorbing male aggression as a form of love. Her endurance is a complex mix of strength and collusion, and Osborne leaves the verdict open. She's neither wholly innocent nor wholly complicit. Ultimately, the play is about more than just individual relationships. It's about how men and women fail to connect across class and emotional barriers. It exposes the broader themes of social rage and the inability to truly understand or communicate with each other. This is what makes the play so powerful. It's a profound exploration of the failure of intimacy, especially within the confines of gender and social expectations. When we talk about to look back in anger, we're referring to a mindset that's entirely focused on the past. It's about responding to the present through accumulated resentment, often rooted in what has been lost or what has failed. Osborne suggests that this is Jimmy's fundamental problem. He's so absorbed in these past regrets that he can't really engage with the present or envision a future. And anger, in this sense, becomes a kind of stasis, a way of being stuck in one place emotionally. Now, the title itself is quite ironic. It claims that anger cannot look forward. Because when someone is consumed by anger and resentment, they're often unable to move beyond those feelings to see what's ahead. Moving into the broader context, we see that the achievements of the 1945 labor government, like the welfare state, the National Health Service, and the expansion of grammar schools, created a generation of educated people who expected a better world. Yet, many of them found that the promised land was still governed by the same old class structures. So, the political reality feels just as disappointing as the personal one. That's a shared sense of disillusionment. This post-war disillusionment is also reflected in Redfern's nostalgia for the empire, for a time when hierarchies seemed clear and purposes more reliable. He recognizes that this world has vanished, but he doesn't understand why. His sense of loss is more elegiac than humorous. It's a mourning for a world that's been taken away, one he can't replace or recreate. And Jimmy, in turn, recognizes this loss, even if he despises what was lost, because he's wrestling with the same sense of absence. Jimmy's emotional touchstone is watching his father die at just 14. His father believed passionately in causes like the International Brigades, but when those causes failed, he was destroyed by disappointment. Jimmy inherited that belief in causes, but also the pain of betrayal. His act of looking back is rooted in a world where people still had things worth dying for, a kind of idealism that's now out of reach. And finally, the title itself is deliberately paradoxical. It's about looking back in anger, but what exactly are we looking back at? Osborne's characters are haunted by both real and imagined pasts. They're caught in a web of nostalgia that keeps them from moving forward. This theme of nostalgia, the past, and looking back really ties everything together, emphasizing how these characters' struggles with their history shape their present and hinder their ability to envision a future. Let's talk about the objects in this scene: the gas stove, the single kettle, the jazz records. These domestic objects are carefully observed. They serve a dual purpose. On one hand, they are realistic, grounding us in the material reality of the characters' lives. On the other hand, they carry symbolic weight, reflecting deeper themes. They embody a life lived under constraints, but they also reveal a consciousness that cannot detach from its environment. This interplay suggests that naturalism here functions as an existential statement, showing us not just the physical conditions, but the emotional and psychological realities of these characters. Now, focusing on the gas stove and the objects around it, these elements set the tone for the entire play. The story begins on a Sunday, and interestingly, the play circles back to Sundays repeatedly. This Sunday routine creates a kind of stasis, a slow, almost suffocating rhythm of papers, routines, and an overall sense that nothing changes. This Sunday monotony is more than just a weekly ritual. It reflects Jimmy's imprisonment, both literal and psychological. In 1950s Britain, Sunday was often seen as a day of enforced rest, but in this context, it's a day that feels like a slow suffocation, emphasizing the stifling nature of their lives. Next, let's consider the ironing board. It's the play's most prominent prop, present from start to finish. Different women appear to iron at it, yet the board remains constant. It symbolizes domestic labor and endurance, those repetitive, often unseen tasks that sustain everyday life. It also stands for the cyclical nature of relationships. They tend to repeat themselves regardless of who is involved. The ironing board, therefore, embodies both the persistence of routine and the endurance required within domestic life. Finally, the setting itself, the one room, one window, one wardrobe, visualizes the physical and psychological constraints faced by Jimmy and Allison. This limited space is more than just their physical environment. It's a physical manifestation of their mental state. They are trapped, unable to escape each other or themselves. The lack of space becomes a powerful metaphor for their constrained lives, materially restricted, but also emotionally confined. The bedsit isn't just a location. It's a prison that reveals everything about their internal and external worlds. It's central to understanding how they live and how they're stuck in this cycle of domesticity and stasis. Jimmy's jazz trumpet represents where his true feelings go when words have been weaponized. Music, which is non-propositional and non-argumentative, carries what speech simply cannot. Osborne uses the trumpet as the play's emotional barometer. When Jimmy plays, we hear what he cannot say. And when he stops, the silence that follows is incredibly telling. The trumpet becomes a kind of non-verbal truth, a private language that bypasses the contaminated, public speech of Jimmy's tirades. Think of it like in the bears and squirrels mode, where he can be vulnerable, tender, even childlike. The play suggests that genuine intimacy requires a kind of language that's just not available in public rhetoric, something more private, more playful. Now Allison's silence is equally powerful. It acts as the play's counter-language. She endures, absorbs, and at times speaks with devastating precision. Her silences are far from passive. They're a refusal to participate in Jimmy's performance. In fact, her act of ironing becomes her way of saying, "No, I won't engage," and that silence speaks volumes. Jimmy's monologues, then, are performative. He's always playing to someone, Cliff, Allison, Helena, or even the audience in the theater. His wit, while genuine, is also a mask. When language turns into a performance, it can't carry real emotion. The more eloquent Jimmy becomes, the further he is from what he truly needs to say. Ultimately, Osborne's play is not just about the words spoken, but about how we speak and what speech itself cannot do. It's a reflection on the limits of language, how sometimes what's left unsaid or expressed non-verbally can be more powerful than words. On this slide, we see Jimmy's sweet stall, which is run by a university graduate. It's interesting because it represents the image of educated poverty and social misplacement during this period. Jimmy's wearing his intelligence in the wrong arena, in a way that highlights his social limbo. His dress, somewhere between working class and bohemian, really underscores his no man's land in terms of class. Moving on, the sweet stall and clothes symbolize more than just his job or appearance. They reflect his social position and the struggle of identity. Now let's talk about Jimmy's trumpet. It's played offstage during tense moments and stands out as the play's most resonant symbol. Jazz in 1956, as you might know, carried deep associations. It represented authentic American expression, anti-establishment culture, and emotional honesty. When Jimmy plays his trumpet, it's like the play temporarily escapes language. It's a moment where he communicates purely through music. The trumpet becomes his honest voice, especially in times of tension or vulnerability. Next, Jimmy's relationship with the Sunday newspapers reveals a lot about him. He reads them with passionate contempt, raging against their banality, complacency, and middle-class assumptions. To him, these papers are the establishment handed to him daily, and his anger is directed at what they represent, the world of comfort and conformity he's outside of. But in a way, they're also his window to a larger world, a world beyond his flat. So, the papers are both a symbol of societal norms and a glimpse into something bigger. Finally, the detailed description of the flat itself isn't just decoration. It's a social argument, a snapshot of Jimmy's economic and existential condition. The gas stove, the single bed settee, the untidy wardrobe, the jazz records, even the ironing board, all these elements tell us about his life. They paint a picture of modest means, but also of a life filled with aspiration and complexity. The physical environment becomes a mirror of his social reality, grounding the play's themes in tangible detail. On this slide, we see how Osborne's stage directions specify the colors of the flat, the dingy cream and faded floral curtains, and these choices carry a very precise social meaning. The visual world he creates is one of austerity and faded aspiration. Nothing in the setting gleams or feels new. It's deliberately dull, reflecting the broken promises of post-war Britain. This visual texture becomes a powerful argument about the disillusionment many experienced after the war. Now, the play opens on Easter Sunday, which is of course the Christian festival of resurrection. The irony here is quite clear. In Jimmy's world, no resurrection is possible. Spring, traditionally a time of renewal, brings no new beginning for him. Osborne uses the liturgical calendar as a deliberate contrast to a world that has lost access to the transformations and hope it promises. It's a subtle but powerful way to underline the themes of despair and stagnation. Moving on to the seasonal imagery of spring and Easter, Jimmy's frequent attacks on Allison often employ animal imagery. He describes her as hibernating or not feeling, which draws a stark contrast between genuine instinct and feeling, represented by the animal world, and the deadened, performative emotions of their social environment. When Jimmy accuses her of not feeling, he's essentially saying she's insufficiently animal, insufficiently instinctive and authentic. This idea is reinforced through the imagery of animals, with Jimmy cast as a bear, symbolizing protection, power, and danger, and Allison as a squirrel, small, gathering, vulnerable. Their relationship becomes a kind of symbolic space where they can connect beyond class, anger, and societal rhetoric. But it's complicated because the bear's protection can also veer into possessiveness and control. So, the imagery captures both genuine care and a kind of dangerous possessiveness, highlighting the ambiguity in their relationship. Lastly, Osborne's use of animal and seasonal imagery grounds the play's political themes in the visceral, personal experience of the characters. The animals, seasons, language, and patterns serve as a symbolic texture that connects the personal struggles to the broader social and political context. It's a very deliberate choice to make the emotional and political inseparable, reinforcing how deeply personal experiences reflect larger societal issues. Let's consider the unresolved ending first. Are Jimmy and Allison healed or have they regressed? Osborne chooses not to give us a clear answer. The audience is left to decide for themselves. This bears and squirrels ending, as it's called, offers no traditional resolution, no reconciliation, no easy change, and no obvious way forward. The ambiguity itself is the point, emphasizing that life and human relationships are often unresolved and complicated. Now, moving to structural repetition, think about Act I where Allison is ironing, and then in Act II, Scene 2, Helena is doing the same. It's the same domestic act, but performed by different women, under different circumstances. This repetitive structure reveals that the core problem isn't just individual but systemic. The same scene repeats to show a pattern rather than a one-off issue. This ties into what we know as dramatic irony. We know Allison is pregnant well before Jimmy does. We see Helena step into Allison's role, unknowingly repeating the pattern. The audience holds vital information about Allison's pregnancy, the recurring cycle, and Jimmy's curse that the characters themselves are unaware of. This layered knowledge creates tension and depth. Jimmy's speeches add another layer. His attack on Bishop Bromley, his declaration of having no brave causes, and his desire for Allison's suffering are extended monologues. They're more like stand-up routines or sermons than traditional dialogue. This structure tests whether a single voice can sustain a stage and emphasizes Jimmy's complex personality, brilliant, cruel, full of self-pity, and hypocritical. Speaking of Jimmy as a character, he's what we call an anti-hero. He's not morally admirable or conventionally sympathetic, but he's undeniably compelling and central to the play. He's brilliant, but also deeply flawed, a reflection of societal issues and personal failings, making him a groundbreaking figure in British theatre. Lastly, let's look at the detail in the setting. the objects in the flat like the gas stove, ironing board, jazz records. These items serve as a social portrait, giving us a documentary-style glimpse into working-class life. Osborne's naturalism here isn't just about realism. It's about highlighting the textures of everyday life, capturing the rhythms of speech and physicality that define this social class. Let's explore some of the key quotes and their significance in this play. First, the bears and squirrels game is really Jimmy's only true moment of vulnerability. It's a private space where he can be tender, free from the public eye. The ending, which is both touching and troubling, shows that this is their closest approach to love. It highlights how fragile and complex their connection is. Moving on, Helena's exit speech stands out as the most honest moment of self-awareness in the play. She recognizes that she's been part of something morally impossible, and her departure is unglamorous but necessary. It's the only truly clean action at the play's conclusion, emphasizing her moral clarity. Then there's Jimmy's statement about not being able to take part in others' suffering. This reveals the play's moral low point. His cruelty is unmistakable, yet it stems from a tortured form of love. He believes that pain might forge a connection with Allison, who is emotionally distant. Jimmy's desire to splash in Allison's tears and sing is a vivid metaphor. It's an attack on her goodness, turning her virtue into a tool of torture for him. Her decency, ironically, becomes a barrier, her refusal to meet his terms. The image of ironing everything out, both literal and metaphorical, underscores this attempt to impose order on chaos. Finally, Jimmy's famous line about his generation being unable to die for good causes captures the deep grief underlying his anger. It's not nihilism, but a reflection of a loss, a sense that meaningful, brave causes no longer exist for their generation. This comment ties back to the overall theme of disillusionment and the struggle to find genuine connection and purpose. Now, this slide covers the critical legacy, later productions, and the cultural impact of Look Back in Anger. First, it's important to recognize that this play has been studied as the founding text of modern British drama. Its influence is profound, with numerous international productions continuing to present it to this day. The BBC produced television adaptations in 1956 and 1980, helping to keep the play alive in public consciousness. Richard Burton's performance as Jimmy Porter in the 1959 film became the definitive portrayal, cementing the character's place in theatrical history. Moving beyond the performances, the play defined British theatre for an entire decade, inspiring other notable playwrights like Pinter, Wesker, Bond, and Arden. It also marked the beginning of a new era for the Royal Court Theatre, opening doors for working-class stories and voices. This was a key moment in launching the so-called angry young man movement, which aimed to challenge traditional class and social narratives on stage. Culturally, the play was a game-changer. It sold out audiences and transformed the fortunes of the Royal Court Theatre. However, it also faced mixed critical reactions. Many critics found it too angry, too raw, even calling it dirty or associated with the kitchen sink realism. Despite this, figures like Kenneth Tynan famously said that he doubted he could love anyone who didn't want to see Look Back in Anger, highlighting its provocative power. In summary, the play's initial reception was quite polarized, criticized but also celebrated. Yet regardless of the reviews, its legacy is undeniable. It changed the landscape of British theatre and sparked a cultural shift that still resonates today. So on this final slide, we see the powerful quote from Jimmy Porter. "There aren't any good, brave causes left." This line really captures the essence of Osborne's play, First Look in Anger, and the sense of disillusionment that runs through it. It was first performed at the Royal Court Theatre in London on May 8, 1956, directed by Tony Richardson, and it marked the birth of kitchen sink drama and the angry young man movement. This play and its legacy are symbolized here by a few key images: an ironing board, bears and squirrels, and a jazz trumpet. These images aren't random. They evoke domesticity, nostalgia, and a sense of rebellion, all woven into the play's imagery. The themes revolve around class and gender, anger and nostalgia, expressed through language that often highlights domestic settings. The play is structured into 3 acts. Act I focuses on rage and a sense of being stuck. Act II explores departures, both literal and emotional. And Act III depicts wreckage, the aftermath of unresolved conflicts. Osborne's work endures because its rage is both historically specific, speaking to post-war Britain, and universally human. It's about the frustration of recognizing what's wrong, having the intelligence to articulate it, yet feeling powerless to change the situation, highlighted by that enduring symbol, the ironing board. When we look back at anger, we see how Osborne captured a moment of societal upheaval, and yet his themes remain relevant today. The play's continued relevance lies in its portrayal of the human condition, our anger, our hopes, and our limitations. In conclusion, Osborne's play endures because it speaks to a fundamental truth, that the rage of the individual, especially when it's rooted in clear insight and deep frustration, is something that persists across generations. And that ironing board, it's still there, still symbolizing domesticity, conflict, and the ongoing struggle for change.